In the previous lesson, we were looking at construction. And so we were constructing expressions and equations and then looking at their actual structure. How were these equations built? And so now what we're going to do is deconstruct these things. So we want to look at equations and how we're going to deconstruct them. So just take a moment to write the construction story for this particular problem. So we look and we notice that x is added by 2, the sum is multiplied by 3, the product is subtracted by 1, and the result is 11. So now, knowing this situation, we want to deconstruct the story. Okay, so if this is how something is constructed, now we want to look at how it is deconstructed. So essentially, this is how it was built, so we're going to unbuild it or deconstruct it starting from the bottom up. And so we start with 11. So you start with the value of the equation, so we're starting with 11. And if the product is subtracted by 1, then that means we're going to have to add 1. And when we add 1, we know that we're going to have a product left over. And that product is the 3 times x plus 2. So now the sum is multiplied by 3, and instead of multiplying, in order for us to deconstruct multiplication, we are going to divide. By 3. And when we divide by 3, we know we're going to be left with the sum, which is just the x plus 2. And now x is added by 2, so we have to deconstruct addition, so we are going to subtract 2. So now when we look at the solve process, we really want to focus on where did this come from? What was done and what was left, if you will, based on this process. So we begin by working with the original problem, so 3 times the quantity x plus 2 minus 1 equals 11. And so we're starting with 11. It says to add 1. So when we add 1, if we look over here, we are left with a product. So this product, which is this piece right here, is what's left when we add 1. So when we add 1, we know that the product is left. And if I add 1 thinking about our webs, we know that that product has to equal 12. So then our next piece is to divide by 3. And when we divide by 3, we were dividing because we were deconstructing multiplication. And we know that a sum is left over. And that sum is this piece right here. And so when we divide by 3, we have the sum that remains. And when we divide by 3, we know that the new value of this equation is 4. And then finally, we are going to subtract 2. When we subtract 2, we know that x should be left. And that's this x right here. And so when we subtract our 2, we end up with just the x that's remaining, and our value is 2. So this result of x equals 2, we know that the value of the variable is now 2. Let's look back to where that came from. So x is added by 2, this construction story, so that how was this constructed, or what is the structure of this equation? We know that x is added by 2, this sum is multiplied by 3, the product is subtracted by 1, giving us with the result of 11. So when we think in terms of how to deconstruct it, so we're unbuilding it, if you will, and I started with my result of 11, and we used subtraction in our building process, so we're going to use addition in our deconstruct process. We're going to use, when we constructed, we had multiplication, so in our deconstruct process, we're going to have division. And in our construction process, we added, and we deconstruct that through subtraction. And so then what happens here is when we add 1, we knew that the product was left over, and so that's the product that is left over when we add 1. When we divide by 3, we know that the sum has to be left over, and so that's the sum that's left over, looking from this piece to this, and then this part to this line. And then lastly, if I'm going to have to subtract, I know that just x is left over, which gives us this value right here. Okay, now let's look at number 2. And so we have this equation this time. Go ahead and just pause the video for a minute or so while you write the construction story. Okay, so a is divided by 2, the quotient is subtracted by 5, the difference is multiplied by -3, and the result is 7. So in our deconstruct story, again, we're going to deconstruct it by going upward. This was our construction, so we're going to deconstruct by going, start with the result. So we're going to start with 7. So the value of this equation is 7. And then the difference is multiplied by -3. So instead of the multiplication, we need to deconstruct multiplication. So we're going to divide by -3. And then the quotient is subtracted by 5. So instead of subtraction, we're going to add 5. And then we divided by 2. So instead of constructing with division, we're going to deconstruct with multiplication. So we're going to multiply by 2. Okay, so now our solve process is going to start by writing the equation out. Okay, and so the first step in our deconstruct is to divide by -3. And so when we divide by -3, we know that we're going to be left with a difference. So this difference is going to be what's left, and so we know that this is going to be left when we divide. And so dividing by 3 means I have this difference left over. And when I have this difference left over, I know that I just have -7/3. And now I'm going to add 5. And so when I add 5, I know that I'm going to have a quotient left over. And that means this is my quotient that's going to be left over when I add 5. And so when I add 5, I know that this quotient is left over, and I have -7/3 plus 5. And then my last step is to multiply, and when I multiply by 2, I know that I'm going to just have a left over. And so when I multiply by 2, I just have a left over. And so now I know that a is going to equal 2 times -7/3 plus 5. And all I need to do is use a calculator and plug that into my calculator so I can compute what that value is. So using our calculator, we're going to do 2 times, and now because we have a -7/3, I'm going to use parentheses again, -7 divided by 3, and for that plus 5, and close that set of parentheses, and I have my answer of 5.3 repeating, which is 5 1/3. We can always go to math, and then we're going to change a fraction to, or a decimal into a fraction, hit the enter key, and now we know that our answer is a equals 16/3.